A crash, a tyre blowout, or drive shaft issues, you can never tell what would happen next on the Formula One track, as the three-time world champion Max Verstappen has gotten a fair share of these unfortunate surprises. Let's take a look at 10 moments Verstappen found himself in unlucky situations. Number 10. Azerbaijan Grand Prix 2018. During the race at Baku in 2018, Verstappen and his then teammate Daniel Ricciardo were in 4th and 5th place respectively when an unfortunate incident occurred. From the beginning of the race, the two drivers had been in an intense battle. They both wanted to be the lead Red Bull driver, and it resulted in several wheel-to-wheel duels that had them banging their tyres. However, on lap 40, Ricciardo crashed heavily into the back of Verstappen's car as he tried to pass his teammate into turn 1. The crash was so bad that both Red Bull cars were completely wiped out, which led to the end of their race. The situation was particularly bad for Verstappen because he really needed the points to go up the drivers' standings. However, he was lucky to have gotten out of the crash unscathed and without any further penalties. But in this next moment, Verstappen was able to fight his way out of the unlucky situation. Number 9. 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The weekend at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was filled with surprises Verstappen didn't care for. First, he caught a stomach bug that delayed his arrival at the Grand Prix. Who knows what he might have consumed. Then, during qualifying, his car suffered a mechanical failure that had him starting 15th on the grid. If you know Verstappen, you would know that must have been a terrible experience for him. Then, during the actual race, he didn't get his desired result. Being a beast behind the wheel, Verstappen was able to convert his 15th place start to a 2nd place finish. He squeezed and battled his way to the very front, with the aim being to finish in 1st place, but his teammate Sergio Perez didn't let him through. At the end of the race, Verstappen was all frowns because 2nd place was still a loss for him. If only his drive shaft didn't develop a fault during qualifying. However, in this next moment, he lost the race and ended up in the hospital. Number 8. 2021 British Grand Prix. The intense battle for the championship title between Verstappen and Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton during the 2021 season is one for the books. They were neck to neck in most of the races, and the British Grand Prix was won. The beginning of the race saw Hamilton clearly in the lead with a pole position during qualifying. But a poor start in the sprint race made him lose his pole position for the actual race, so he had to resort to fighting neck to neck with Verstappen for 1st place. Both drivers didn't give each other an inch during the race, and in Copse things went wrong. Hamilton was on the inside going into Copse, and Verstappen had tried to get ahead. In a corner at such a high speed, Verstappen's move resulted in a horrible crash that had him rushed to the hospital for a checkup. To make things worse, Hamilton, who was also at fault for the crash, only got a 10-second time penalty, which did nothing to prevent him from driving to victory. That particular moment hurt Verstappen, but it was nothing compared to what happened at Baku during the same season. Number 7. 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. In Baku that year, Verstappen was on fire. After beating Hamilton and Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc during qualifying, he was ready to convert the pole to a win in the actual race. To make things nicer for Red Bull, Perez had also earned a P2 position, so a 1-2 win looked quite likely. But 5 laps from the end, Verstappen suffered the most unfortunate circumstance. Earlier in the race, Lance Stroll of Aston Martin had lost control of his car due to a tyre blowout, and Verstappen must have been one of those who thought, how unlucky. But just a few laps later, with the win right within his reach, Verstappen suffered the same fate with his rear tyre. He was on the straight when the incident occurred, so it resulted in a high-speed crash that completely ruined his vehicle. Although the Dutchman was lucky to have gotten out of the crash unscathed, he lost the 25 points he really needed. Baku was bad, but the Hungarian Grand Prix of the 2021 season was even less pretty. Number 6. 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix. Going into the Hungarian Grand Prix, the Red Bull drivers were looking ready to stun everyone, but unimpressive 3rd and 4th place finishes by Verstappen and Perez in qualifying turned down the hype. However, the duo had a good start despite the wet conditions, but things changed when Valtteri Bottas happened. The Finn driver had started from P2, but he soon lost his pace to fall behind Lando Norris, who was behind Perez. So, to recover some pace, Bottas had tried to force his way ahead and things went completely wrong. On the wet track, Bottas braked and crashed into Norris and then slammed into Perez. Then Norris crashed into Verstappen. Bottas, Norris, and Perez were immediately eliminated, but Verstappen had gotten lucky to continue his journey. However, the damage to Verstappen's car seriously slowed him down and he ended up finishing in 9th place. Verstappen must have been furious at Bottas after the race, but in Italy, the Dutch driver had cost himself the race. Number 5. 2021 Italian Grand Prix. At the beginning of the Italian Grand Prix, Verstappen found himself stuck behind the Australian driver Daniel Ricciardo. All efforts to get ahead proved abortive, and he hoped at the pit stops he'd get his chance. Then, during the pit stops, another complication held him up, and Verstappen found himself coming out of the pit stop the same time as Hamilton, who he initially was ahead of. It was at that moment the Red Bull driver decided it was all or nothing between him and Hamilton. The two title rivals crashed into each other so fiercely that they were both immediately eliminated. In fact, Verstappen received a grid penalty for the next race because he was the reason behind the crash. But in this next moment, his team was to blame for his loss. Number 4, 2023 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Verstappen missed out on finishing in first place due to a miscalculated move by his team that had gotten him furious. On lap 10 of the race, Nick de Vries had suddenly stopped on the track after hitting the inside wall at turn 5, damaging his front left suspension. The world champion had decided to box under the yellow flag conditions, not knowing that a safety car would emerge later. When the safety car emerged, Perez and Leclerc, who were Verstappen's major rivals, had seized the opportunity to lose less time. And this got them ahead of Verstappen when the race was restarted. Although Verstappen was able to get ahead of Leclerc to finish in P2, he couldn't forgive the mistake his team made. But for this next moment, Verstappen was just unlucky. Number 3, 2022 British Grand Prix. Verstappen had been dominating the grid all 2022 season, and he was ready to charge ahead of his rivals during the British Grand Prix, but an unfortunate incident put a stop to that. In the race, Verstappen was already doing his thing when his car suddenly started slowing down. Thinking it was a punctured tyre, the Dutch driver had pitted for the issues to be immediately rectified. But the Red Bull driver soon found out that his entire floor had been damaged due to debris his car had picked up on the tracks. Earlier in the race, the two AlphaTauri drivers Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda had crashed into each other. Unknown to Verstappen, his car picked up some of the debris from the AlphaTauris, so the unfortunate incident cost him the win that had been almost certain. However, in this next race, Verstappen didn't even finish on the podium. Number 2, 2023 Singapore Grand Prix. Right from qualifying, it was clear that something was amiss with the Red Bull vehicles. Both Red Bulls had dropped out in Q2, meaning they would have to start the race at the far end. Usually, Verstappen would have fought his way to the front of the grid. But at the 2023 Singapore Grand Prix, that wasn't the case. Verstappen had struggled to get 5th place from the back of the grid. Although he tried to get ahead, Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc wouldn't let him through, and Verstappen was forced to accept his fate. The car had disappointed the Dutch driver in Singapore, but in Monaco 2016, Verstappen himself was out of control. Number 1, 2016 Monaco Grand Prix. In the 2016 Monaco Grand Prix weekend, Verstappen suffered 2 huge crashes. In the qualifying race, Verstappen crashed on the exit of the swimming pool complex. The crash was so bad that the team had to change the chassis overnight. Then, in the actual race, Verstappen smashed into another barrier at Massenet after making some bold overtaking moves. No one knows what was on the young Red Bull driver's mind, but the double crashes would go down in history as one of his unluckiest moments. So, do you know any other unlucky moments for Max Verstappen? Kindly let us know in the comments below.